Hello ladies and gentlemen, Fox here. So I am a big fan of the YouTuber Bearing. So naturally I have closely been following the Bearing doxing saga since it started about a month ago. So in the latest chapter of this saga, about a day ago, Bearing hosted a live stream with Demotivator Opinion, aka Tim. The first half of the live stream was dedicated to Tim demanding that Bearing provide evidence that Christy Winters was behind Bearing's doxing, and then not allowing Bearing to get a word in edgewise when Bearing tried to provide said evidence. Tim's number one criticism of Bearing's evidence is that he says it is hearsay, so I decided to compile Bearing's evidence so we can examine it one-on-one to determine its validity and its validity as a whole. After watching the live stream, it seems to me that Tim is easily confused, so I want to try and make this as simple as possible. Let's start with two facts of the case. On December 5th, 2016, Bearing's YouTube channel was shut down on DMCA violations. Then on December 6th, Bearing was doxed on Encyclopedia Dramatica. Now you may not think that these two things have anything to do with each other, but I do believe that Bearing's channel being shut down is a relevant piece of information, and I'll show you why later. Bearing puts forth the following information as evidence that Christy Winters was behind his doxing. 1. Tim's account of a Facebook conversation between unnamed feminists who were apparently sharing amongst themselves Bearing's personal information and discussing what to do with that information. 2. The Twitter conversation between Tim and Bearing Cap, wherein Tim leaks that he believed, based on a second-hand account, that Christy Winters and Danny Corks were part of that Facebook conversation. 3. The video that Tim put out where he confirmed that that is what he had heard second-hand, that it was Christy and Danny that were involved in the Facebook conversation. 4. Christy's uncanny ability to be front and center to screen cap the doxing of Bearing on the day that it happened, and her subsequent spreading of links to that article in various conversation threads. 5. The Encyclopedia Dramatica editorial notes, wherein the editor stated in no uncertain terms that the information came from Christy Winters. 6. The conversation between Cobalt Cat and Liz Reptile, wherein Cobalt Cat, who was the Bearing's doxer, stated that he got his information in part from Christy. 7. The Twitter conversation between Bearing and Georgia Hinckley, who claimed that she had given Bearing's personal information to Christy, alluding to the fact that she was a main source of Bearing's doxing. The first three pieces of evidence I will take together as one, because they are all in relation to the same Facebook conversation. This, as Tim claims, is in fact hearsay. We do not have any first-hand accounts from people who are actually involved in that Facebook conversation. We only hear what Tim heard from somebody else who said that they were part of that Facebook conversation. And unless we get an eyewitness testimony from that person, this is in fact hearsay. The fourth piece of evidence is that Christy Winters was front and center at the time of Bearing's doxing. According to her own admission, when she screen capped this page, the page had been accessed 476 times, which means at most, Christy was the 476th person to see this page. This is where Bearing's YouTube channel being shut down becomes significant. At the time of Bearing's doxing, his YouTube channel had just barely been shut down, and there were thousands of Bearing fans searching the internet to find more information on what was going on with his channel. I don't believe it is an unreasonable assumption that there was a constant stream of people checking a website that is known for keeping up on internet gossip to see if there is any information about Bearing's YouTube channel being shut down. So the fact that Christy Winters was at most the 476th person to see this site means that she was either very, very lucky, or she had an idea that it was going to be happening on this day. Subsequently, Christy Winters put out a video wherein she said that she was not going to share the information of the site that had doxed Bering. Yet at the same time, she was spreading that information in multiple comment sections of different videos. While this piece of evidence is purely circumstantial, it does show a certain amount of glee that Christy Winters had in Bering's doxing. I find the information in the notes section of the ED article especially interesting, mostly because Winters' involvement in Bering's doxing is revealed in the midst of an argument between the editor and one of the contributors over whether the doxing of Sugar Tits was a step too far. I feel this information being brought up as part of an argument gives it extra credibility. In the conversation between Bering's doxer, Cobalt Cat, and Liz Reptile, Cobalt Cat states quite clearly that Christy Winters was one of his sources for Bering's information. Finally, Bering's seventh piece of evidence is a Twitter conversation that he had with Georgia Hinckley. Georgia claims to know Bering IRL, and told him that she had taken information that she knew about him and passed it on to Christy Winters for the purposes of doxing him. So going back to Bering's list of evidence, we've established that the first three are hearsay. The fourth is purely circumstantial. But Bering's fifth, sixth, and seventh piece of information are quite damning. But maybe to better understand this, let's use an analogy. Let's say Christy Winters is on trial as a mid-level distributor of heroin, and the prosecution brings in the street-level drug dealers, which would be Cobalt Cat and the ED editor, who say, yes, Christy Winters gave us heroin to sell. And then they bring in the heroin manufacturer, Georgia Hinckley, who says, yes, I gave Christy Winters heroin to distribute. That is what happened with Bering's dox. There is a clear line of custody that came from Georgia to Christy to Cobalt Cat, who published the information. In the United States legal system, there are two levels of proof that must be achieved depending on the type of law that is being practiced. In criminal cases, the burden of proof must be beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, a reasonable person should not have any doubts that the accused crime was committed. Given that this is the internet, where trolling is a favorite pastime, and that we are dealing with professional trolls, I think it's reasonable to believe that there is some amount of trolling going on here. However, in civil cases, the burden of proof is only a preponderance of the evidence. Or in other words, does the evidence show that it is more likely than not that something happened? And in this case, I believe that it is certainly more likely than not that Christy Winters was involved in some way in the doxing of Bering. But perhaps we should give this to a jury of Christy's peers. Jury, what is your verdict?
We, the jury, find Bering guilty of wrongthink.
We weren't talking about Bering. We were talking about Christy Winters and doxing. Well, there you have it.